It's Success Happens on 930 WFMD, blending business and politics. Success Happens with your host, Jen Charlton.
Good morning and welcome to Success Happens. It's great to have everybody here with us. And I am, this has been an interesting time when we look at the different conversations we're having privately, publicly. Some of them are not being said when they should be said in places like, Main Street media. But we try here to address things that maybe Main Street media isn't willing to. And I was talking with Robin today, we are a bridge between some of the things that are being said off of, we'll call it offline, but actually it's online, of Main Street media that they won't cover. Some things that challenge the status quo and challenge the system. And yet here we are on WFMD 9:30 a.m. It's my pleasure to be here every Saturday morning and to bring to you information and conversations that maybe are difficult to have elsewhere because we are so politically and philosophically divided. But I think today's show is going to bring all of us together in some common conversation that is, if you think about it, like truing up to the mission of the country. I've said it before, our Constitution is like our mission, our values, and our vision all wrapped up in one. If we were a corporation and we were operating with those different elements, that's what we would true up to. And that's really what our Constitution is. And when a company or corporation or organization drifts off of purpose, okay, we call it mission creep, right? Mission drift. You lose sight of that which you are created for. You really lose your way, and you run the risk of not existing anymore. So we're today going to address our mission creep and our drift off purpose from our Constitution. And it's my pleasure to have with me today Ken Davis, who is an author of the book Revolution. And if you search it on Amazon, you're going to search for Kennerly Davis. The book is called Revolution. I've had the pleasure of starting to read it. They overnighted it to me so I could dig into it. And I already absolutely love everything he says in the first 4 chapters. So good morning and welcome to Success Happens, Ken.
Good morning, Jen. And thank you so much for having me on your program. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be able to spend some time with you and your listeners this morning.
Wonderful. And I thank you for availing yourself on a weekend. You were the Deputy Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and you really oversaw transportation, infrastructure, and land use. And then you also spent 15 years in private practice as a senior finance executive for a Fortune 500 electric power and gas company. So you have a broad experience to draw from in terms of what you can bring to this notion of Constitution, but also capitalism, why capitalism matters as opposed to socialism and some of these other philosophies that people are trying to, frankly, infuse into our culture. And we're a mess right now. I don't know if you feel that way, but I do.
Well, I think mess, unfortunately, is a very descriptive term. And yes, indeed, I have been fortunate over my career to be able to serve and work in a variety of positions that, broadly speaking, have covered the practice of law, public service, and business management. And so I think you make a very good point and a very, very good comparison between the Constitution and the founding documents, the chartering documents, the mission statement for a corporation, because that's exactly what the Constitution is. When the delegates from the various states assembled in Philadelphia, dissatisfied with the ineffective performance of the Articles of Confederation. They came together to make important and significant structural changes in the national government. And as it says importantly at the beginning, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union among the states, not a perfect union. No, they were too well-read in history and too humble to think that they were setting up a perfect system, but certainly better than they had. They established the Constitution, which divided the functions of government among the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, and all of it designed to, in fact, form a more perfect, more effective structure to respect and protect our natural rights that had been affirmed in the second paragraph of the Declaration. And they were very well-read students of history. They had suffered also under an abusive monarch for years, and so they knew what structures of government worked and what structures didn't, what structures protected the rights of the people and allowed them to, if you will, pursue their life in liberty as they might choose. And so they set up our government and, if you will, our business as a nation in a way that was designed to give all of us the best chance possible to lead a free and productive and prosperous life. And unfortunately, we have, in fact, over the years and really for the last 100 years, with the rise of the progressives on the left and more recently increasingly radical leftists, we have strayed far, far, far from that constitutional structure. And we're at risk, I think, serious risk of losing our liberty and prosperity. But
well, let me jump in there. You know, I think maybe we've already definitely lost some of that. And one of the things you make mention of in your book is the idea that they sought to move power from one individual, a ruler, and redistribute that power to we the people, so that no one entity, I'll call it, would have that level of power. Thus, the three branches of government. But what we're starting to see, I think, is an amassing of that power, and we've seen it in the deep state, back to one type of ruler, even though it may be many, many, many people, one form of rule over the people that no longer is given by or subject to the three branches of government. And those three branches of government have been corrupted. So that's where I think people like myself are so frustrated, because we see this destruction of the design that was so, as you called it, a more perfect union, or they said a more perfect union, and you reference that in your book, that we've become less than that because we've allowed that to happen. We didn't even know it was happening. It was happening, under the guise of, evolution or social change or good for the people. But we've really started to lose sight of and lose grasp of our individual rights. What do you say about that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right about I'll call it the reconsolidation of power. I mean, look, every society, every government has to make some fundamental decisions when it sets up business and starts running. And all of those really have to do with the relationship of the individual to the group that forms society and to the government, and how the individual fits in and relates to the groups around him and the government. And related to that, one of the most important decisions when people are, if you will, constituting their government is where ultimate authority is going to be placed. Ultimate authority, sovereignty, the last word, the last decision. Now, for most of history and still in most places, ultimate authority has been placed in the ruler, the king, the tribal chief, the head of the military, the head of the Communist Party, the Fuhrer. All were sovereign. And in that kind of arrangement, kind of a pyramid with the ruler at the top, everybody else was like bricks in the pyramid, and their place and their prosperity and their lives, in fact, depend on the decisions of the ruler, and there's no real protection. But in 1776, and this is what people lose sight of, because we have lost our appreciation of the wonderful, exceptional nature of our founding. What they did in 1776 was turn the pyramid completely upside down. And they said, it's not the ruler, it's not the government that's sovereign with the last call, it's the people. And that's appropriate and proper because the rights of the people that are going to be exercised under the organization of government, those rights don't come from the government. They're not created by the government. Those rights come from the hand of the Creator, not from the generosity of the ruler. And so they said,
all right. Hey, Ken, let me just let you know, we're going to go to a quick break, and we're having a little bit of an audio issue, so we're going to just take a break right now. We'll get that sorted out. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Success Happens on Free Talk 930 WFMD. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Dave Dianovich, owner of Dianovich & Associates, a global security company. We offer top security professionals with vast law enforcement and military experience on rapid deployment to protect property and lives. With the current climate in our communities, we continue to deal with widespread protesting that can turn violent. Our team is available to protect you, your family, your business, regardless of the coverage you need. Call us at 866-476-1703, or you can visit us at DEANOVICH.com. Our mission is your survival.
When was the last time you had fresh homemade ice cream? Sweeties on the Creek is making ice cream. Stop in and taste our fresh-made selections, including dairy-free and all-natural flavors. Enjoy a fresh cup of coffee with creamy shaker sundae. Taste a new fun flavor or an old yummy favorite. Sweeties, fresh made from cow to cone. Sweeties on the Creek, just up from Market Street. We're scooping now.
Hi, this is Steve Nibbs inviting you to join myself along with our best local coaches and athletes at a new time for the Frederick County Sports Weekend Show, Saturday mornings at 11:30 on 930 WFMD.
Don't touch that dial. You might miss something big. Free Talk 930 WFMD.
Good morning. Welcome back to Success Happens. This is Jen, and I have with me Ken Davis, otherwise known as an author as Kennerly Davis. You can find his book, Revolution, on Amazon, and it is awesome. And it really brings us back to the point of the Constitution and what we were talking about before the break, are individual rights, and those are God-given. And it begs the question, Ken, excuse me, it begs the question about this notion that people say, well, but if it's good for the people. So, for example, you're steeped in regulatory issues, right? So that's something you have a background in your career. So I want to hear kind of your opinion on that. When the government imposes regulations, we've seen it a lot at EPA. Some of those are really good, right? Clean up the Chesapeake Bay, for example. We're all very interested in making sure the bay is clean. So those were good regulations that helped to ensure that manufacturers weren't dumping in the bay and so forth and hurting our farm and fish. But at some point, it imposes on business, capitalism, and the people restrictions that become cumbersome and infringe on their rights. So how do you find that balance?
Well, the balance in a representative government, a Republican democracy, small r Republican democracy like the Constitution establishes, the balance needs to be struck by the people through their elected representatives. I mean, in all the regulations or any kind of economic policy making that you might think of, you're talking in one level about the allocation of limited resources. We've only got so much money. We only have so many acres of land and so forth. And so how, as a people, are we going to form and live in the best possible society as we may define it? And all of those decisions, again, in a Republican democracy, should be made by the elected representatives of the people. And the founders set it up that way, putting all legislative authority under Article 1 of the Constitution in the Congress. And the executive branch that's discussed in Article 2 of the Constitution was established to administer, execute, apply the rules as they were made by Congress, in the way they were made by Congress, until the representatives of the people decided to change those rules. But the problem we have now, and it really began around the turn of the 20th century, when the progressives began pushing the idea that, we're entering a new century, things are really complicated, the economy is expanding, immigration is growing, cities are becoming more and more populated, and there are all kinds of new complicated issues that need to be addressed. And this old system, they dismissed the system as a relic. It's just too complicated and too cumbersome to be used and to be relied on to face these problems. And we need a new system that grants much more authority to, they said, experts in the executive branch who were given, they said, should be given broad sweeping authority to apply their technocratic expertise and come up with the solutions to keep the factories safe and the water clean and so forth. Now, everybody wants safe factories and a protected environment, but the fundamentally important issue is how you come up with the rules that are designed to accomplish that and balance all the considerations that you ought to be balancing. And what we have now is a if you will, a procedural mess where most of the law in this country, because the regulations passed out of executive branch agencies are laws. They have the full force and effect of a law as it might be passed by Congress. Most of the laws in this country are now passed, enacted, and then enforced by unaccountable executive branch bureaucrats. I think in a recent year, there was a measurement taken, and just a couple of years back, and there's no reason to think it's any different. When you look at the laws passed by executive branch agencies compared to the number of laws passed by Congress, the agencies were passing 18 times the number of laws being enacted by Congress.
So let me just back that up for people who because I'm grasping what you're saying. So let's take the EPA, for example. They take it upon themselves to issue what are in effect laws, and they bypass that legislative process, which is where we, the people, are supposed to be hiring people to do that job. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. I mean, the Congress contributed greatly to this problem over the years by, I'll say, abdicating its responsibility to address in a meaningful way issues of, for example, environmental protection. And they've gotten more and more into the, I'll say, sloppy and kind of lazy, dangerously sloppy and lazy habit of passing laws that are just a collection of generalities and concepts, and with delegations of authority to the regulators to do the heavy lifting to come up with the details. They just say, the EPA shall do what it needs to do to protect the fill in the blank, the air, the water, the soil.
Well, and a lot of times, let me just interject there if I could. A lot of times they abdicate, to your point, to the what we call a SME, right? Subject matter expert. So they're the subject matter expert. What do I know? I'm just a legislator. So I'm going to give them, autonomy to make decisions carte blanche. And I think, to your point, that's part of a broken system. I want to say something, then we're going to have to go to break for news and weather. We got a text message, so I want us to ponder this on the break. It's from a listener who said, who would have the guts to do the ideas that you've described in your book? Is our political system too broken? And I think on that note, we're going to take a quick break. I want to thank our sponsors, Sweeties on the Creek, we're scooping now, and KW Photography and Design. That's Akira Wynn. She's wonderful. She's done a lot of work for me. Highly recommend her, and we'll be right back. Good morning. Welcome back to Success Happens. And I have with me today Ken Davis, who is the author of Revolution. And you can find his book on Amazon, but you must search for Kennerly, Kennerly Davis, to find him on Amazon. It's a great book. Highly recommend it. I love it already, and I'm 4 chapters in. I wanted to just remind people of something. We hear this all the time, but I think it bears repeating. So I'm going to actually quote something out of your book that you quoted from the great Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving these just powers their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Boy, it sure sounds like we're there. Do you have any thoughts about that? And then we're going to talk about unalienable rights and frankly, the abuse of those that we're currently going through.
Well, that statement in the second paragraph is the beating heart of the American experiment. Years later, Lincoln, who, of course, had a lot of insightful things to say about our rights and our system of government. Lincoln, in talking about the Declaration and the Constitution, talked about an item of gold, the Declaration, surrounded a picture of gold, a picture drawn in gold, surrounded by a frame of silver. And that really captures it. The purpose of the Constitution is to secure, protect, and respect the natural rights affirmed in the Declaration. And to your very good comparison to a mission statement, the Constitution is designed to try to ensure that we are the bosses and the government is the employee. We are the principals and the government is the agent. And when the government as our employee or as our agent breaks the compact, then we have every right, because they are natural rights. We have reserved rights to make whatever changes in the government are necessary to resecure our natural rights. And what we need to do is restructure the operation of the current overreaching, oftentimes abusive federal government, and return it to its limited mandate that's described under the Constitution.
Okay, let me. You've got a bunch there. Let me jump in because I want to make sure I don't step over this. So we've seen those abuses, right? It started, if we think back many years ago, there was something called the IRS abuses toward people that did not support their political views within government. So government was supposed to be apolitical, but at the IRS, they decided that anything that was conservative was not okay. And so any conservative nonprofits were not given status, right? And so we went through that whole mess, right? And then there were issues around, there were issues with the SEC, and there have been now issues with the FBI. And we've seen a tremendous abuse of power and, frankly, flat-out corruption within the Department of Justice, which is the one place we should feel safe that they are doing the right thing for the people, not for their personal interests or gain. So now we're looking at, just recently, they've said they're going to start seizing guns. The gun grab is coming, guys. And we've already witnessed in COVID the mandating of masks and now vaccinations. They're talking about vaccination passports. I have somebody who follows me in England who said they are doing it right now to get into pubs in England. They're outraged. How do we, so let's start with COVID, because that's something that we're all really, frankly, terrified about. Vaccination should be a choice, not a mandate. What do you say about that?
Well, it should be a choice. I mean, I've been, I'll say, at this for years, and I've seen a lot of policy failures and a lot of policy abuses. And it's easy for me to conclude that the abuses and failures and mistakes made during the COVID pandemic are the worst in my lifetime. And a lot of them flow from a combination of over-reliance on supposed experts and the agendas, the limitations and or the political agendas of the regulators and experts that we defer too much to, whether they're modelers in the public health area. You remember at the beginning of this thing, everybody was freaked out by models, computer models that were generated, I think, in the University of Washington, the state of Washington, and over in the University of London, that projected catastrophic fatality rates and catastrophic rates of hospital admissions. Now, none of those models turned out to be correct. They all overstated it by magnitudes.
Well, and if I could, let me step in there. The medicine, the business of medicine had grown. If you compared it to a pandemic back in the early 1900s, and you're a professional, and frankly, you're advising the President of the United States, you have a responsibility to not bring your politics into it and to advise him. I really fault Fauci. I've said for months, maybe 9 months, that I didn't trust that guy. So, and there's a lot of history that I was privy to maybe before even it became public about his involvement with Wuhan and all of that. But I digress. So when you look at this idea that we have the rights to determine our own future, our own health. You talk about choice, women's choice. On one hand, it's women's choice. You have the right to take a life, but you don't have the right to choose vaccination or no vaccination. So it's an inconsistency that they're applying, and it's a convenience. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a glaring inconsistency, but the consistent thing is you look at all the decisions about all the issues, the troubling, indeed frightening consistency is to pacify the American people, demoralize us, confuse us, place us more and more under the control of supposedly apolitical technocratic experts. How many times have we heard follow the science? Well, in the COVID thing, we followed the science right off a cliff. There was never any justification for the sweeping long-term lockdowns that were imposed. Some states in the United States from the get-go managed this more effectively and much more in a manner that was much more respecting of the people's rights. If you think the American people are capable of governing themselves at all, we could have addressed every issue in the COVID pandemic as a matter of, or in the form of guidance and suggestions and information instead of mandates and lockdowns.
And I'm going to add to that, Ken, lies. They just flat out lied. The data was an absolute lie.
To overstate the problem, to further, if you will, worry us, to make us more fearful. They listing the statistics of fatalities in the numerator and reported cases in the denominator to give you a fatality rate really overstates the fatality rate because of all the asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic cases that were never reported officially. And people throughout, we would have been much better off with honest, truly expert information and guidance that made more clear to us that we were more likely to catch this. But if we did, then these statistics indicated. But if we did catch it, we were less likely to have serious consequences.
So I want to, say something, because this kind of goes back to the text question. And he asked, who would have the guts to do ideas that are described in the book? Is our political system too broken? So the question is, here we are. We're in a, I'm going to say it here. There's no way Joe Biden won that election. I mean, it's just no way. So in the midst of a pandemic with false data and mask mandates muzzling us up and vaccinations that we should have the right to choose for our body. Okay, here we are, and we end up with a guy in office who can't even walk upstairs straight.
Mm. Yeah.
And he can't even answer questions straight. He has to have all the questions answered to him. Now we're fed this person who's really a representative of this deep state cabal that has now taken power over us. How do we, the people, resurrect our Constitution? And I'm going to blow through this break because this is too important. We've only got about 10 minutes left. So I think we are begging this question, Ken. How on earth do we save the ship?
Well, we have indeed reached a perilous point, and I agree with you. It's no exaggeration to say that the American experiment is on life support. I mean, last summer we saw the lawless violence that was spread across the country, the destruction that devastated cities from coast to coast. That physical violence has subsided for the moment, but the hostility from the left, and this goes all the left, I mean the progressives as well as the radicals, their hostility to the principles and institutions that define the idea of America is unabated. If anything, it's increasing. You see this in the relentless and steadily intensifying assault on our constitutional right to speak and associate freely, the radical legislation designed to codify all the ballot abuses of the 2020 election, and on and on and on. So what indeed are people to do? Well, that was the purpose in my book, was not only to describe or complain about the situation. I wanted to really help people make a sense, connect all the troubling dots, make sense of the events around them and the real reason that the left is attacking our history and founding, why the rule of law is important, indeed what the rule of law is, and most of all, how to help them as individuals with their family and neighbors and the parents they know through the local school system, overcome all the false narratives of the left and work on reigniting the spirit of the American Revolution. I mean, the revolution in my book title is the American Revolution. And what we're up against are really the counter-revolutionary, authoritarian, totalitarian leftists that have been rising and for over 100 years in this country. So what do we do? What do we do? Well, they're erasing our history and transforming, and they have transformed schools from instruction into indoctrination in order to take away from us as individuals the knowledge of the exceptionalism of our founding principles and institutions. That's why they denounce the founders as merely racist slaveholders. They want to keep us away from an understanding of the principles of the founding, because the principles support limited government and limitation on government power, and they want to wipe out our understanding of the principles so that they do not obstruct their continued drive for unlimited power. There's a part in Orwell's 1984 where the one party that dominates everything in the hero's country has a slogan that he who controls the past controls the future. And that's what we see. And so to push back, and in a way this is a challenging task, but in a way it's simple. Like President Reagan used to say, things are not nearly as complicated as people think. They may be difficult, but doable if we make the decision. And what we need to do is reacquaint ourselves with the founding principles and institutions of this country. Lincoln, in the very troubled times leading up to the Civil War, where lawlessness was widespread, he spoke repeatedly about the need to teach and speak and talk about and celebrate the founding, the founders, and their accomplishments. And that's what we need to do, and that's what the book tries to help people do with concrete.
All right, let me step in here. I want to just say something, because you've said so much that is really great, and I want to just first state, people, buy the book. Secondly, read the Constitution. Heritage Foundation has a great website where you can go and download this. Read the Constitution. Read it several times. It's rich and it's simple. So we need to understand, to your point, these basic principles, and we need to true up to them. We have done a mission creep, and we need to get back to the truth of who we are. I want to go back to something that I recently saw General McInerney speak on a piece. It was a digital piece, but he said, "This is our Normandy." And I thought about that, and I said, if those men and people were willing to die on the shores of Normandy for our freedoms to be retained, who are we to give up now? If the men and women who serve us today and who have lost life and limb have done that for our freedoms, who are we to give up today? So we must fight on. And that, this notion of, co-opting the word fight, no, you don't own that word fight. We can fight for our freedoms, and we can fight for for justice, and we can stand for liberty and have it not be about making us violent, okay? We need to get clear about where the violence lives and where the manipulation and deceit lives. And so we cannot kowtow and we cannot cower to those notions. And when we step down and we abdicate our voice, we are done. So I have refused to do that. And I've had people attack me. I can't worry about it anymore. It's not about me anymore. This is our Normandy. And I really appreciated that he said that. I want to make sure we introduce people to an organization that you are intimately involved with, the Federalist Society. Would you please share with everyone the purpose of the Federalist Society and why you're involved with them?
Well, I'd be really happy to have an opportunity to do that. I've been a member of the Federalist Society for almost 20 years. It's an association. It's a 501c3 as an organization. And it's an association of members who are conservatives or libertarians. They're constitutional conservatives who are firstly interested in legal and political issues that raise constitutional questions, and we seek through our activities, and those activities include conferences, and now there's Zoom conferences and publications and all kinds of similar activities designed to facilitate a discussion, an ongoing discussion of the issues that we're talking about this morning: constitutional government, the overreach of the administrative state, and freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the fundamental issues, the resolution of which will decide our fate as a free people. Now, the Federalists started back in the late 80s into the 90s with a handful of law school professors and law students who were concerned about the domination in law school faculties, not everyone, but a lot of them, of Marxists who were advancing doctrines that were called critical legal studies. Anytime you see critical something or other, it's a red flag, literally a red flag, indicating that the advocate is seeking to advance one form or another of Marxist theory. Critical theory generally says all these institutions, the laws, the traditions, the values, civil society are nothing more than the thoroughly rotten, systemically corrupted systems of oppression, and we need to knock them all down.
Okay. On that note, I'm coming up on the end of our show, and I think that's a great place to say to everyone listening and everyone you know, it's time for you to share this show. Go to our podcast. You can share it from WFMD.com. There's also a new app, WFMD app. Please sign up for that so that you can listen to our show wherever you are. But I want to thank you so much, Ken, for being on the show. I would love to have you back. There's so much more we can talk about here. Ken is the author of Revolution. Go to Amazon.com, not my favorite, but this is where you're going to find his book. And you have to search it under Kennerly Davis. Kennerly Davis, the book is Revolution, A Call to Turn Back the Lawless Left and Restore the Promise of America. Please also follow me on charltoncommunications.com. I'm in the process of renovating that website. I did a great interview, you guys, with Jesse Pippi, Delegate Pippi, about some of the things that we're seeing here in Maryland that actually are a reflection of what we've just talked about. Have a great week. Listen next Saturday morning at 9 a.m. for another great show of Success Happens. Thanks to our sponsors. Have a great week.